Welcome to This Got Me Thinking, where clarity comes from conversations and the connections that spark from them. I am your host, Chris LaFay, and today I had the pleasure of chatting with Ryan McClellan. This conversation didn't start out with a success story, it started out with a failure. The kind that doesn't just cost money, but forces you to confront who you are when things don't necessarily go your way. Ryan walked through a business partnership that unraveled slowly, painfully, and publicly. Not just because the idea was bad, but because behavior, identity, and control became entangled in ways that he didn't recognize until it was too late. This episode is about what happens after the business breaks, and also a little bit about selling pins and what has to change so that the next one does not. I'll let Ryan tell a story. So tell me a little bit about your start as an entrepreneur, because it sounds like you actually got a really early start on this. It was actually very similar to me. I got started back when I was in middle school. But I'm curious, tell me a little bit about kind of where you began with things.
It goes back to the age of 5. My grandfather was he would basically raise me and my mom. I wouldn't be who I am without my grandfather. He was the first. This was back in I guess the 50s and 60s. He was the first television repair company. He started the first television repair service and company in Miami Beach, Florida. No one was repairing TVs. I don't think anywhere else in the world. I think he was like just solo on that. So he had a business sense. And I came on that side of the family. There's been a lot of the entrepreneurial drive. But at 5, he was, I would get dropped off there and just hang out with him. And he had this button making machine. And this was before internet, so you could just go online and order a button in bulk.
Right.
No, this was it would take 10 minutes to make the button from scratch. But we worked together on it, and he had a brilliant idea, and it actually generated some income. Not for a 5-year-old anyway, though it was a lot. Basically we thought to ourselves, okay, well, what could we do with buttons that are interesting other than just you could print anything? And his idea was brilliant. There's a lot of mothers and people that when you're having a child, what better way to remember the child than to put it on a button? Shooting forward in elementary school, I realized a lot of students, I always came with pens and pencils and paper, and I was always prepared. I was the typical elementary school nerd, very, but not in a bad way, in the sense that I realized there was a demand for all these kids were always asking me to borrow a pen or do you have any paper? Because they knew I had it. So I said to myself, I can charge for this. So and after school care, waiting for my mom to pick me up, and even the teacher at the daycare, whatever it was called after school care basically. And I set up a little sign, and I would charge okay, a dime for 2 hours with the pen. It was just an entrepreneurial drive, man. It's been that way for my whole life, but I would say that would be the start. But I really didn't hit off onto anything in particularly grandiose until 18.
So talk to me a little bit. Let's actually go back some. Okay. So you started with the button making business. You then transitioned that into leasing pins to children. And what was next? You then we talked a little bit about the whole lean startup, lean marketing idea of make the most minimal piece. And I know that you started a lot of businesses overall. So I'm curious, was there a business after the pin leasing business to where you actually didn't really take these lean startup practices, but you actually went overkill on it, and that ended up biting you in the butt a little bit?
It was just the most complicated experience of my life. I look in, it was 2017. I think the website still exists, but it's a paywall, so you can't even do a free trial. This is one of the reasons why I founded the company with psychologists in Nevada. This was 2017. So this was kind of around the time telehealth was starting to begin. And my idea was, personal development. We had 60 courses. These were done all on a. The investment was literally maybe 20 grand. And basically we spent 2.5 years making this entire platform. We
Oh
outsourced
wow.
it. We majority of the money, and this was kind of the issue that I had. I guess you could say working with my partners, I was trying to go about the method of, okay, well, we had to build this in increments and we had to get it, build one thing at a time and then ask people for input. It's not always necessary. Sometimes there is demand for something. You could just build it and have no friction. But this one was complicated because it was, this was on a $20,000 budget. Were working with outsourced developers, and I thought we were done by year one. I thought we were done. It was time to market it. And we spent an extra year and a half against my advice at the time, adding and adjusting and just really nitpicky features that really didn't matter much at the end. And long story short, one of the partners, unfortunately, I guess the estate, she had passed on. Unfortunately, just natural. She had forgot what it was, but it was very sad when she passed. But what happened was the equity shares on her end went to the estate. In other words, went to the other partner. So it went from the imbalance. So all of a sudden, I had no say. And it was kind of just like, I was thinking, this is good to go year one. Let's just launch and use the rest of the funds for marketing. That one was, I don't think anyone's ever signed up for it. If the last time I went to the website, just to see if it was still up, it was paywall. The moment you log in, it doesn't even tell you what the site is about. It's asking you to enter your credit card number. And that was the issue I was having with dealing with this, because I was thinking to myself, we had this at a prototype off of a $5,000 budget. We had 15,000 left. Why not use that to market it, build it up, test it, do something? No,
Yeah.
we wasted 2.5 years. One and a half of those years against my advice. I didn't want to abandon it because companies are kind of you get involved, they become your child. And that was one where she gave me $500. She said, "Okay, time to market." And I said, "Yes, we're finally done." $500 marketing budget, which not many people have to understand this. You don't have to be in business, but $500 to market,
No.
that's going to get you a couple business cards. That'll get you a couple
Yeah.
business cards, and maybe and that was kind of when I just said, okay, I basically resigned, and it got very messy after that. I don't know why. She was a very wonderful partner, wonderful woman, but I guess losing the other partner, as well as just at the time, this was before I kind of learned, I guess you could say, self reserve. In other words, I was a little bit I'm an extrovert. I could tell you are too, but I would get kind of hostile at times. I'll put it this way: I was very arrogant at that time. Likely so. I was 25. This wasn't my first business, but this was probably I would say the one that mattered the most to me. And it was just hard having to resign. And she kind of sent. I guess I was. She made up for anything negative I said during the process of building it to her, or just maybe not meaning harm, but just kind of wording things a little harshly. Like, she kind of gave me uh basically I was getting cease and desist notice, don't contact me, and it was crazy.
So I'm curious. There was a moment there where you had mentioned that this was. I mean, you put a lot of time and effort and energy into this thing. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and so many business owners have their personal identities wrapped up in whatever business or businesses, plural, that they've started. For you, what was what was that tipping point like to where you finally realized that this business is not my identity and I can move on from this and it doesn't impact who I am?
That's a good question. Um, I'll put it this way. It was one of those projects where it's like you really didn't want it to fail, but I guess the tipping point would have to have been um I went out to she was located in Nevada, so Las Vegas. We went out there, um, and it was just kind of I really don't know. I think it was mostly just a lot of disagreements about the development. I would say within that first year, that moment when I realized that that my input was kind of being overlooked. It's not so much the input; it was a matter of just I built this bit. I came up with the idea, and they came on and did their part, and it was a great idea. But it was just along the lines of losing the ability to have control does in its own way, everyone always says business is business. I've always disagreed. It is a living organism. It's kind of your child, and it's the end of the day, it's like raising a baby. And within that first year, it was going so well, and then finally, it was kind of just when we started iterating on things that were small details that really didn't need to be um, touched upon, small, minuscule details that the developers had to keep going back and doing. And uh, it was basically that, just going kind of that loss of control over the company. But I guess to answer the question, it didn't make me lose my identity because at the time, I was just thinking to myself, you know what? Number one, I knew it wasn't going to work after that first uh, period of, I guess you say, discretion. I realized, okay, well, she set her mind on it and she kind of took control of it. So I really didn't have input, but it didn't really, it actually made me more aware of my, not just behavior, but just the way a business is run. So it was actually a benefit rather than losing self identity. I gained a new identity from it in that sense.
How did this experience shape your future ventures?
It made me realize that sometimes, and this is a personality trait, I'll be transparent. Everyone has different mechanisms, I guess, for coping with stress, frustration. Some people withdraw, some people just brush it off. Me, up until that point, I would react to stress or frustration with what came off as not just arrogance, but just plain old rude. I've been called on that many times. People saying like, "That's not how you talk to someone," and so it kind of made me realize, okay, well, I got to start looking at this as a. I had to go with a different personality, different mindset. It kind of changed my demeanor and made me realize, okay, well, I can't. Business is business, but it's also people. We do have transference on one another. We all have an impact. And the business is business mindset kind of gives us that thought that, okay, well, we could say whatever we want. It's just business. At the end of the day, you're still talking to a person. And no matter how um, even in since then I've met a lot of people where they act in that manner and I start seeing kind of myself in it and I kind of go like, okay, I see what everyone else was seeing. And that kind of changed my outlook. And from there, everything got a lot smoother. As far as business wise consulting, I realized uh, rather than if I'm in a mindset where I know I'm not to be trusted with an email, I'll put it that way. I'll save a draft of it and I won't send it. I'll read it the next day. And there have been about 50 instances where I'll read it the next day and say, oh, I should not have said. I'm glad I didn't send that. And I guess that's a lesson in emotional regulation is realizing that, we have to realize that we sometimes had to get kind of slapped in the face, and not literally, but in a sense of, we had to be shown, yeah, we had to be shown, some sort of consequence from our behavior, and I had never had that until this one.
The question I want us to dive into today is, what pins are you leasing? Like, really, when Ryan was talking about the fact that in school he leased pins to students that he sat alongside of, my first thought was like, holy crap, that's never gonna work. But the dude made some money from it. Like, that's just nuts. So what pins are you leasing to the audience that wants to hear from you? Apparently, there was enough students that wanted to rent a pin, that he did it. And it's simple. It's not hard. Like, the idea that he had was not this complex system and structure with all of this operation. It was just like, I got pins. You want to borrow it? Hand me a coin. Like, that's it. And I feel like when we're thinking about the products that our companies offer and the types of clients that we go after and the messaging around and the positioning, the whole nine yards, is we forget the simplicity. And don't get me wrong, this is the pot calling the kettle black. Like, I have always struggled with what is the simplest thing that we can sell to the smallest target audience. So, like, I realize that I don't have this down as well as I should. But when an opportunity waltzes in like that, where there's a clear-cut value proposition to where you can basically solve somebody's problem in exchange for money, man, that's just a glorious and wonderful thing. And so the challenge to you today is, how can you simplify your business and just lease pins? That's what Ryan got me thinking.